Eagles Nation! This matchup didn't just appear on the schedule by chance. It feels like something the league has been circling for a while now. Eagles versus Bills in Week 17, a game that was close to being last year's Super Bowl and finally gets its moment with real stakes attached for both sides. And from the Eagles' perspective, this isn't just another late-season test. This is about positioning, identity, and whether this team is actually ready for what comes next. Smash the like button right now if you bleed green and white with pride and truly believe in this team. The Eagles are already NFC East champions. That box is checked. But the story doesn't end there, and anyone inside that building will tell you the same thing. There is still a real push for the highest seed possible because history has shown exactly what happens when this team gets to play through Lincoln Financial Field. Every Super Bowl run in the modern era has gone through South Philly. That's not noise, that's reality. And while the 3 seed looks likely, the door is not fully closed on the 2 seed if things break the right way and the Eagles take care of their own business against Buffalo. That's why this game matters. Not emotionally, not symbolically, practically. What makes this week different is that the Eagles are not limping into it. They're getting reinforcements where it matters most. Lane Johnson is back. Jalen Carter is back. Those are not rotational pieces. Those are foundational players. Lane Johnson, outside of the quarterback, might be the single most valuable player on this roster. The offense is simply not the same without him. The splits with and without Lane are dramatic, especially in the run game and in overall offensive stability. Fred Johnson has filled in admirably, better than most backups ever have, but he is not Lane Johnson. Nobody is. Jalen Carter's return matters just as much on the other side. The defensive tackle rotation has held up better than expected in his absence. Jordan Davis, quietly, has been playing at a Pro Bowl level even without the recognition. He has been one of the best run-stopping interior linemen in football this season. Morrow has been one of the most underrated defensive tackles in the league. But when Carter is in the lineup, everything gets easier. The pocket collapses faster. The run lanes shrink. The entire front benefits. And that timing is critical because Buffalo's identity is not complicated. It starts with the run. James Cook has been the engine of that offense all year and is right at the top of the league in rushing production. Even with Josh Allen under center, the Bills are a run-first team. That makes this a real trench game, especially considering that Josh Allen is dealing with a foot injury that clearly affected him late in the Browns game. He finished, but the offense stalled. And the concern isn't whether he'll play. The concern is what version of Josh Allen shows up. That matters because this Eagles defense is built to punish limited quarterbacks. If Allen cannot be the full rushing threat that defines his game, the Bills' offense becomes much more manageable. And it's not lost on anyone that Philadelphia has been the best team in football at limiting tight ends, which happens to be where Buffalo leans most in the passing game. From the Eagles' side, the offense is still very much a work in progress. This season has followed a familiar pattern after a Super Bowl run. Coaching turnover, new play callers, offensive inconsistency. The highs are high, the lows are uncomfortable, and everything feels louder than it probably should. Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni both bring championship-level strengths, but they also have clear limitations when things aren't perfectly aligned. That's part of why this season has felt like a roller coaster. The play-calling situation is a big piece of that. Nick Sirianni was hired with the idea that he would call plays. That changed quickly in 2021 when Shane Steichen took over and the offense took off. Since then, it has been a revolving door.
Steichen leaves. Brian Johnson gets fired. Kellen Moore moves on. Now it's Kevin Patullo, and there are real questions about whether this version of the offense is sustainable. When the head coach isn't calling plays and the quarterback has defined strengths and weaknesses, inconsistency becomes part of the package. But there are signs of life. The run game has started to find rhythm over the last few weeks. Under-center looks have increased. The offense has been less predictable. The marriage between run and pass concepts has improved. That matters, especially against the Bills' run defense that has struggled badly all year. This is a unit that gives up explosive runs, misses tackles, and struggles with gap integrity. And even though Saquon Barkley hasn't been as efficient as he once was, the big play ability is still there. When he reaches the second level, he can still flip a game in one snap. The passing game has quietly stabilized as well, largely because the Eagles have stopped forcing things and started being more intentional. The relationship with A.J. Brown feels repaired. The frustration, the cryptic messages, the tension from earlier in the year have given way to production. 4 of the last 5 games over 95 yards, 3 100-yard performances. He's right on the edge of another 1,000-yard season. And it's not just volume anymore. They're moving him inside, using reduced splits, getting him the ball quickly and letting him work after the catch. It finally looks like a plan instead of a concession. All of that brings us back to why this game matters beyond the standings. This is a measuring stick. The Eagles have beaten teams they were supposed to beat. Now they face a battle-tested opponent with playoff urgency, elite quarterback play even at less than 100%, and a physical identity that challenges the core of this roster. This is not about style points. It's about whether the Eagles can control the line of scrimmage, limit negative plays, and prove that the progress of the last few weeks is real and not just the product of weak opponents. With Lane Johnson and Jalen Carter back, the excuses are gone. This is close to the version of the Eagles they expect to be when January arrives. So as you look at this matchup, not just Eagles versus Bills, but what it represents for Philadelphia heading into the postseason, do you see this as a true turning point for this team, or just another step in an unpredictable season? What happens next is where this game really reveals itself, because once you strip away the narratives, the history, and the playoff math, it comes down to whether the Eagles can play the type of disciplined, physical football that has been missing for stretches this season. The margin is thin, and against Buffalo, small flaws get exposed quickly. If the Eagles allow this game to become about time of possession, that's where problems start. During the 3-game losing streak earlier in the year, the defense was repeatedly gashed on the ground. Dallas did it. Chicago did it in a way that still lingers. Even the Rams found success controlling the pace. When that happens, the Eagles are forced out of their identity. They are not built to chase games. They are built to dictate them. Jalen Carter's return directly impacts that, because it limits James Cook between the tackles and forces Buffalo to be more intentional with how they run the ball. But the Bills are not going to simply run into the teeth of Jordan Davis and Carter all afternoon. They will test the edges. They will try to make the linebackers run laterally. That's where the absence of a fully healthy Josh Allen could actually change the game plan. A less mobile Allen puts more pressure on the offensive line, and that is where the Eagles' pass rush has quietly turned into a strength again. Since Brandon Graham returned, since Jalen Phillips was added, since Nolan Smith came back, this front has been generating pressure with 4 rushers. That matters, because it allows the secondary to stay disciplined without overexposing itself. There is, however, one important caveat. Nakobe Dean is unlikely to play, and his absence changes the complexion of this defense. Over the last 2 months, he has been one of the most effective blitzing linebackers in football. His timing, his ability to close space, his sideline-to-sideline range have been central to how this defense disrupts quarterbacks. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. brings instincts and effort, but he is not the same type of weapon in pursuit or as a blitzer. That puts more responsibility on the defensive line to win on its own. On offense, the Eagles cannot afford to sabotage themselves. Penalties and negative plays have been a recurring issue all year. Every time momentum builds, it feels like a holding call, an illegal formation, or a personal foul pulls the offense back into long yardage situations. Against Buffalo, that is a losing formula. The Bills' defense thrives when offenses get behind the chains and become predictable. Staying ahead of schedule is non-negotiable. That's why the recent shift toward more under-center looks matters so much. Earlier in the season, the tendencies were glaring. Under-center meant run. Shotgun meant pass. Defenses adjusted easily. Over the last few weeks, those lines have blurred. The Eagles have married concepts more effectively, making it harder to key on Saquon Barkley or sit on short routes. Jalen Hurts has also looked more comfortable seeing the field from these alignments, especially when the offense spreads defenses out with empty sets. Hurts himself is a critical variable. After the ankle issue 2 weeks ago, there was real concern about whether his mobility would be compromised. Against Washington, those concerns eased. He ran decisively, protected himself, and looked closer to his normal self. That matters because this offense loses an entire dimension when Hurts is not a threat with his legs. The same is true on the other sideline with Josh Allen. Both offenses are built around quarterbacks who stress defenses horizontally and vertically. Remove that, and everything tightens. The matchup on the outside also cannot be ignored. A.J. Brown against Christian Benford is one of the defining battles of this game. Benford has quietly become one of the more consistent corners in the league, especially since mid-season. He has held his own against elite receivers, and Buffalo will trust him in high-leverage situations. But the way the Eagles are using Brown now makes that matchup more complex. He is no longer just a boundary receiver winning contested catches. He's being moved inside, put in motion, and given opportunities to create after the catch. That forces Buffalo to make choices, especially with DeVonta Smith also nearing another 1,000-yard season on the other side. Still, even with all of that, this game may come down to moments that don't make highlight reels. Can the Eagles stop runs for no gain and force Buffalo into 3rd and long? Can the offensive line give Saquon Barkley clean entry points instead of asking him to create magic behind the line of scrimmage? Can the defense capitalize on a potentially limited Josh Allen without giving up explosive plays? These are the questions that separate playoff teams from true contenders. And then there is the issue nobody wants to talk about but everyone is thinking about: kicking. Jake Elliott has been inconsistent, missing multiple kicks over the last few games, often in the same way with the same leftward miss. The coaching staff's decision to go for 2 instead of kicking extra points raised eyebrows and only amplified concerns. In a game expected to be close, that uncertainty lingers in the background. No one wants this decided by special teams mistakes, but football rarely asks permission. When you put it all together, this isn't just a late-season inter-conference game. It's a stress test. It's about whether the Eagles can play clean football against a physical opponent, whether the recent offensive adjustments hold up under pressure, and whether the return of key players truly elevates this team to another level heading into January. As this unfolds, watch the details. Watch the first quarter run defense. Watch how often the Eagles stay ahead of the chains. Watch how Buffalo treats Josh Allen's mobility. Those details will tell you everything before the final score ever does. What also can't be ignored is how much this game reflects the emotional maturity of this Eagles team. All season long, the conversation around Philadelphia has swung wildly from week to week. One moment, the locker room is described as fractured. The next, the team looks unified and locked in. That volatility hasn't disappeared, but what's different now is how the players are responding to it. Clinching the division didn't trigger celebration. It triggered focus. That tells you a lot about where the mindset is right now. Inside that locker room, there's an understanding that nothing has been earned beyond an opportunity. Veterans on this roster know how quickly things can unravel in January if habits aren't right in December. That's why this game against Buffalo matters beyond seeding. It's about proving to themselves that they can play a complete game against a physical, disciplined opponent without self-inflicted wounds. That's especially important for a team that has lived on the edge all year. Too many games have followed the same script: strong starts, offensive stagnation, defensive stress, and a tense fourth quarter where execution has to be perfect. Against lesser opponents, that formula has survived. Against Buffalo, it may not. The Bills are comfortable in close games. They expect them. If the Eagles give them extra possessions or short fields, that's a dangerous path. Another layer to this matchup is how both teams mirror each other in key ways. Both rely heavily on their quarterbacks as part of the run game. Both lean on physicality in the trenches. Both have defenses that can take over games when momentum swings. That symmetry is why this game feels like a postseason preview even if it never becomes one. There's a sense that whoever controls the tempo early will dictate how uncomfortable the other side becomes. For the Eagles, that starts with imposing their will up front. When this offensive line is healthy and functioning at a high level, it changes everything. The playbook opens. The defense stays rested. Jalen Hurts doesn't have to be perfect. Lane Johnson's presence stabilizes the entire right side, and that has a ripple effect on protection schemes and run designs. It's not just about blocking one defender. It's about confidence across the unit. Defensively, the goal is clarity. No busted assignments. No missed fits. No free runners through the second level. The Eagles don't need to dominate every snap. They need to force Buffalo to earn everything. Long drives increase the chances of mistakes, especially if Josh Allen's mobility is compromised. The longer this game stays structured, the more it favors Philadelphia. And then there's the psychological component of beating a team that has never lost to you. The Bills have yet to lose to Sean McDermott and Josh Allen against the Eagles. That stat has been mentioned all week, and players hear those things whether they admit it or not. Ending that streak would be another quiet confidence boost heading into the postseason, even if no one publicly frames it that way. Ultimately, this game is about validation, not for the fans, not for the media, for the team itself. Validation that the lessons from the inconsistencies, the frustration, and the adversity have actually been absorbed. Validation that when January arrives, this group won't be learning on the fly. So as you watch this one unfold, don't just focus on the score. Focus on how the Eagles respond when something goes wrong, because something always does. That response will tell you more about their playoff future than any statistic ever could. Another element that deserves attention is how this game fits into the broader question of trust. Not talent, not scheme, not upside, trust. All year, the Eagles have shown they can win in multiple ways, but they haven't consistently shown they can be trusted to execute cleanly for 4 quarters against high-level competition. That's the final hurdle. And Buffalo, even with its own flaws, is exactly the kind of opponent that exposes whether that trust is deserved. When you look at the Eagles' wins this season, many of them required resilience late. Comebacks, defensive stands, timely plays. That's admirable, but it's also risky. Championship teams don't live in survival mode. They impose themselves early and force opponents to chase. This game is an opportunity to flip that script. With a healthier roster than they've had in weeks, there's no reason for Philadelphia to play tight or reactive. What's also notable is how the Eagles' defensive identity has quietly shifted as the season has gone on. Early in the year, the defense relied heavily on coverage holding up while pressure arrived late. Recently, that pressure has come faster and more consistently, even without heavy blitzing. That evolution matters against a quarterback like Josh Allen. The goal isn't just sacks, it's disruption, forcing earlier decisions, shrinking throwing windows, making every completion feel contested. On the offensive side, patience is going to be tested. Buffalo will try to take away explosive plays. They will live with short gains if it means preventing chunk plays. That's where discipline becomes critical. Staying committed to the run even when the gains are modest. Trusting that 4-yard runs in the first quarter turn into 8-yard runs in the fourth. This is where the presence of Lane Johnson and a more synchronized offensive line can quietly tilt the game. Jalen Hurts' role in all of this is subtle but decisive. He doesn't need to dominate statistically. He needs to manage the game with authority. Avoid negative plays. Protect the football. Use his legs selectively rather than desperately. When Hurts plays within that structure, the Eagles are extremely difficult to beat. When he's forced into hero mode, the offense tends to stall or become chaotic. There's also something to be said about momentum heading into the postseason. Teams don't carry records into January, but they absolutely carry habits. How you practice, how you handle adversity, how you finish games. A strong performance here doesn't guarantee anything in the playoffs, but it does reinforce the right behaviors at the right time. That's invaluable, and that's why this game feels heavier than the standings suggest. It's a snapshot of who the Eagles are becoming, not who they were earlier in the season. Are they still searching for consistency, or are they settling into a version of themselves that can survive the chaos of playoff football?